this strong, one thing that just, I think realization-wise, it may have to cause us to make a couple shifts. I think because of the way things are going and what even questions were presented, and also to leave you guys a chance to ask questions, let's do this. Two things that would, I think maybe in the spring, let's plan something that could be a gender-specific theme. But if you're a woman who needs something before the spring, like you need your answer yesterday of something, or you're curious about something, Kelly and Shauna would both love just to exchange email with you guys and then get a time that you can meet together. And if not them, I know other ladies in our church that would be glad for you to be able to do that with. Ken and I the same way, guys. And that way it allows us not to have to rush in here, keep things loose. And I say this, feel free asking any question. If we think that it's not best for a group like this, or if we're just we'll blush too much to answer in a group like this, then we'll let you guys know the context. But I think let's cover a few things and then let's open it up, finish strong with some Q&A, and make sure we all have commitments post 1 o'clock, and we gotta get this room back in shape. And so let's not go over our time, just to be respectful of the time you guys have already given.
And I'll just add to that, it's not a duty to talk about these things, or I'm supposed to be able to talk about these things because we're married to men in ministry, but Kelly and I love to talk about marriage. We love to talk about parenting. So it would please us to be able to have those conversations with you girls, ladies.
All right, so be thinking about your questions. I'll give a couple that were introduced here, and then we'll talk about some of the things we still had left over from the original list of questions. And then you guys, seriously, let us know, like, hey, we really would love to hear more about this or that. You want to start here or you want to start there? All right, we're gonna let the ladies lead the second half of the discussion, and we just happen to be on the topic of romance and intimacy. So, ladies, I know you guys think about this all the time, and this is what you're thinking about it now for sure. Why don't you give us some best practices? Let's it's hot here. Let's start with romance and then we can move from there. What is important? What do these men seriously need to know? And I'm not talking about just sex, but what do they need to know as far as what's really important, what's been helpful, those kinds of things.
Well, I'll start. When we asked about conflict, is it good or bad? For me, going into marriage, was sex good or bad? I would say bad. Then, now no, I wouldn't be here. But I went from not seeing my parents even hold hands to, my dad feeling the stepmother up in the kitchen, and I was just like, this is disgusting. I am just not sure how this is going to go for me. And just asking God for what does He say about sex? We did a study with our youth. We went through the book of Song of Solomon, and we're talking about hot in the room. It was, sex is good, and it's meant to be good. And I would just say for, how do you receive love? And talking that about to your mate on, what works for you, and being open as far as, I like to receive gifts, and Kenny likes if I don't know, wash his favorite shirt when he needs it tomorrow, but I don't have time and I do it. That acts of service works for him. Does that make sense? But just knowing how you receive love will kind of go into your romantical side. Go ahead, Shauna.
You did that so nicely. You kind of dodged the bullet. Now you're throwing me the bullet. I think it helps to know how you were brought up and what you were seeing early on. And that's in every aspect of marriage, how it shapes you going into marriage. And but I would even say what I've learned through our marriage is that we do receive love in two different ways. And that affection for me is a high need, whereas intimacy, I think I thought that they were, okay, if I'm just being affectionate towards you, that should be enough, Whereas, go ahead and chime in.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Whereas he was wanting a little more. But I think also, and I think I go back to what Kelly was saying, is I thought maybe it was just a duty rather than something to be enjoyed together. And just something really funny about my mom, which you're kind of thinking, why are you bringing your mom into this? Listen, it helps. Growing up, or maybe when we were engaged, I am headed back to college, and Mom already knew that Ben had asked for my parents' blessing for him to ask me to marry him. And she kept handing me this book. What was it? Intended for Pleasure? And so she keeps handing it to me, and I'm like, I don't need that yet. And I head off to college 12 hours away, and I open up the trunk of my car to unpack all my things from Christmas, and there on top of the suitcases is the book. And I, call Mom, and that was like a long distance call then. And like, what are you thinking? And she's like, just read it at your leisure. Just read it at your leisure. But I think the one thing that I did see healthy and just in my great parents' life is just that intimacy is a beautiful thing to be shared with your spouse. And one thing she even wrote me a note, and it was in my suitcase for our honeymoon. And in the note, it was very, and you're laughing, but I appreciated it. And probably cried when I read the letter.
I did as well.
But the thought was, and she knew, just when we were virgins when we got married, she knew that the next few days were probably going to be difficult. But her letter just simply said, it gets better and better and better. And she's right.
She is right. So, now this is true. So I've told you guys my proposal, like when I asked for Shauna's dad's blessing, it was real serious, intense, and then her mom comes in the living room. It's just the three of us, and then we go to a high school basketball game where her sister is cheering, and I'm in the back seat of the Crown Victoria, and her dad's driving, her mom's in the passenger seat, and remember her dad's a pastor, and that's the environment Shauna grew up in. And so Shauna's mom said, Ben, remember we're not engaged yet. There's no wedding date. I just asked for their blessing. She says, Ben. She said, I want to tell you what's most important when it comes to marriage. And being a pastor's wife and knowing her, I thought she'd say, no, Ben, you've got to keep Christ at the center, and God's got to be the big idea behind your marriage. And she said, remember now, just ask for the dad's blessing. She says, Ben, you've got to keep the passion burning. The stove's not even preheating. I mean, what do you mean keep it burning? And so the thing I read now, I'm just like, this guy in the front seat should have killed me when I asked for the blessing. Now he really should kill me and his wife. Man, that was tough. But I do say, and I don't want this to sound like a broken record, but I do want you to see the common theme, even when it comes to sex. If you want great sex, the question is not how do I win, it's how do we win together. What's the win for us? And the win for you will include sacrifice by both people. It will. And I don't know, Ken, if you want to take this to the next rated level, but I didn't say X-rated, I said the next rated level. But it's just one of those things that goes in along the line with communication and everything else. But it is for us. What's the win? Have we created a safe environment in our home and specifically in our bedroom? What's the win? And am I willing? The way you'll know it's a win for the marriage, and not just for you, because you'll be doing things at least occasionally that you wouldn't count as number one. And I don't mean that just sex, I mean in the way that you spend your time. I remember on our honeymoon, we were in the New England area. I'll be honest, first we tried to see if the Patriots or Celtics were playing. They weren't, so we went to the Nutcracker Ballet. And we're sitting there in the theater, and just to let you know how uncultured I was back then, if you think it's bad now, Shauna looked at me, she said, Ben, there's no talking in this, right? To which I looked at her and responded, yeah, I know, I'm not going to say a word. She was like, we know that no one was going to say a word tonight. And anyway, just imagine that. When you're asking what's the win for us, then you will have to do things that are not natural and that you used to not enjoy. Maybe you still don't enjoy at times. But again, that's within the environment of something that's safe and comfortable. And by that I don't mean that you don't have to get out of your comfort zone in life, but you have to create that haven, I think, at home.
We started in the garden, and the garden's an interesting place because in the beginning they weren't even wearing clothes. Everything was just natural, right? And so there was this relationship of receiving and releasing. right? So God was constantly releasing to them what they needed. And for me, I'm going to try to be careful to not get myself caught in a corner here, but, I'm a guy. And when I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep. I mean, I get what I typically want. But in a marriage, when you think of romance really happens at its best when I'm receiving from Kelly and she's receiving from me. You see how that works? So I'm not having to get anymore. Neither is she. There's this exchange going on, and that's where romance happens at its best. So, this was our moment. Kelly would hook me up with her friends, go on a date, we might kiss, and I'd feel guilty, and that was it. Because they were Kelly's friends, and I liked Kelly better, right? So I just never went past that. It was like, I don't know, for us guys, maybe it's just the victory of being able to hold the hand or get the kiss. And so with Kelly, we started dating, and we went for 6 or 7 months, and it was one of those things where I was not about to screw it up. You follow me? I just wasn't going to go there. And I'll never forget that first time our hands intersected, and it was just natural. It's like you go to a movie and they play the music, and it's that magic moment. And then we're at a carnival. I want to say carnival, not carnival in Brazil, but at a carnival, I guess America. That's what we call carnival in America. I never thought about that, but anyways, the rides go round and round, and it just happened to be that one ride where they're playing 80s Metallica type music, headbanging. And we're going fast, and the G-forces are kicking, and it just happens that our faces intersect. And it was one of those moments where I go, this was natural. It just happened. And I'll tell you, we got married, and it became unnatural. Why? Because I began to pursue what I wanted when I wanted. And the beauty of our marriage is that to the extent where we try to get something, it goes bad. To the extent where we try to give something, it gets better. So Kelly had a birthday this week, and we decided to get her a certain number of gifts that matched the number of years she's been alive. You can tell it. She'll tell you how old she is. And it's a significant birthday. And in the midst, the kids put together a package of what Mom and Dad's party night would look like. Right? So her favorite foods, her favorite drinks. And so our children are very much aware that we schedule time, even within our own home, where they go to bed and it's our time. Right? And we're looking at that time not just about getting, but giving. And that's where romance, it goes back to the decisions, it goes back to the values, because you're doing this stuff together. And when it's done right, it's magic. It's magic. I haven't met a single person who has gone through hell in their marriage who didn't have a magic starting point. Where it went wrong was after that point. And the hard work of marriage is making sure that we continuously exchange what she needs. That's my job. If I will just give Kelly what she needs, romance happens. I don't know if you have any thoughts to add to that.
I think one of the questions was, why does the romance die out? After kids.
Wanted to do it at all sometimes. Why after kids?
Yeah, why after kids? I read something that I wanted to share, which is really explains this. It says, keep making and remaking the means of a loving sexual expression, always refitting to your new circumstances. So if you have a new baby, you're going to have to refit, and it doesn't go away. It just becomes a little different. You're making adjustments.
It becomes a lot different, but at least in our household,
Yeah.
it is an adjustment. What do you say to the man and the woman during that time? Because as a new mom, I know that's like there's this whole new thing. Not only has there perhaps been difficulty with the pregnancy, but then the reality of what's going on and why we as men should be most compassionate because of that situation. Like you said, when we're hungry, we need to eat. And how do you mix those two things? I'm the question asker here, not the answerer. So what do you guys think for those people who have been in that situation, are, and will be in the days ahead?
I'll just say those younger years when your children are really young, it's hard. It is hard. And speaking from the female, think the husband has to take into account of what the female body is going through in labor and delivery and now having a newborn and the hours of sleep and the hormones are all over the place. And just the husband to realize this is a season, this is just a season. But for the woman to also realize that it's just a season. And that when the time comes and when you can, the ways you can still, and like you said, there's different ways of doing things, and you have to, or Kelly, you said that, and that in those days when the children are really young, how can I still love my husband in ways that would please him and meet his needs, while at the same time figuring out what my body's doing as I've just had a baby. But the seasonal thing is key. You realize, our kids were pulling suitcases through the airport last Christmas, and I looked at Ben, and he looked at me, we're like, we're in a totally new season now. They can pull their own suitcases. This is big. But it was one of those realizations of, that season before where we were packing up a stroller to get it onto the airplane. We're just in a different season now, and realizing those seasons, when you're in them, seem forever. But they do change, and it's learning to and communicating with each other through those seasons.
And I think going back to the sowing and reaping thing, I think the season analogy is huge. Remember what I said to some of our leaders last Friday night is, when we had time to go up to Napa and spend some time with a guy who was over the whole vineyard, it was amazing the detail that he would tell us about when stuff that would happen in January or February, that if they didn't take care of it, if it got too cold, things that they had to do, an alarm would go off at 2 a.m. But something that if he didn't take care of it in January or February, then when August and September came, he didn't have any good wine. Does that make sense? So remember, when you're in those seasons, they're not forever, but you better sow during that season. And I can tell you this, stay faithful in that season. Ask for God for strength and extra grace, especially for both of you need it in that season, and your kid needs it too. But I do think if you sow well in that season, the harvest time will come, and that can be a really glorious thing.
Something that I would add too is I would say you need people around you who have the freedom or the ability to get in your face. You know what I'm saying? People who know you well and will call you out. Because it's not a matter of if you'll be selfish. You'll be selfish. I have a very dear friend who was in my kitchen in San Francisco about 6 years ago. He pulled me aside and forgive me for the use of hell. He goes, "What the hell's your problem?" I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I've never seen you talk to your wife that way." You see, I'm a better man because I have men in my life who have the ability to ask me what the hell's my problem. You know what I'm saying? So you need people in your life who love you enough to call you out, to remind you that a marriage doesn't work based on what I get. Because, when we lost our children, we've had 2 babies that we've lost. Let me tell you something, that was a tough season. And there were all kinds of emotions we were going through. And those are typically a little easier to respect the boundaries on. But then there are other seasons that you're going through that are not as easy to capture. And you need people in your life to push you and pull you a little bit. And then I'm thankful for if you have a family in your life, allow that family to play a part. If you don't, find a family that can. And so Kelly and I brought a book where in 2005, my mother handed us this book. And it's amazing how somebody you give access to, like your mother, knows the right time to inject something. And so the moral of what I'm saying is, have people in your life that love you enough to apply the brakes, and others to inspire the romance in your marriage.
I think we had a season when we were living in Missouri, when we were trying to build back what was most important and just to refocus our marriage and family, that God blessed us with a couple in our lives where Ben could have the tough conversations with the guy, and I could have the tough conversations with the girl, and vice versa. And we developed a friendship that was really centered on making each other's marriages stronger, in that I could ask her the hard questions and vice versa. And I think that was a big part, because it's so easy, especially before you get married, to let the culture and movies and so much create a picture of what marriage is supposed to look like, and especially what intimacy is supposed to look like. Because it's all done perfect on the movies, right? But it's so different lived out in real life.
Is that not how it is in real life, Sean?
Kick up the music, guys.
She always says better than the movies, but
true.
Hey, before we move on to some other things related around this, and remember, if you don't want to ask the question for yourself, just say you have a neighbor who was wondering, and then ask the question. Anything along the lines of this? Well, a couple of things where we're headed in a bit, for the sake of time, is we want to really talk about just the issue of faith in dating and marriage, and then we got a couple specific questions about, hey, is there only one person God designed for us, and then a question about how do we really help our spouse when our life isn't so unhappy or we're not going through a crisis, but they seem to be having a crisis. So anything along the romance/intimacy side, and again, you can ask very general or specific questions. Yes.
Hi. I had a question about, obviously there's some people in this room who aren't virgins. You don't have to point fingers. But how do you go from a life of maybe you were sleeping around and now you're celibate and you meet someone and you can't necessarily say, oh, I'm a virgin, because that's a lie, but
Right.
you're not sexually active at that time.
Yeah.
And you want to stay on that track of I'm waiting until I'm married, but how do you move? I don't know. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's a
Okay.
great question, and certainly thanks for being brave enough to ask it for the sake of a lot of us in this room. Yeah, great question. Well, I think first of all, it's again, what are my values really? Because remember, it's easy to say that I've changed in that area, or even that I want to change in that area when I'm not with someone, right? It's really, doesn't that make sense? Like, man, if there's no opportunity, I can say that I'm doing awesome in the celibacy, right? I mean, it's pretty. And so I think first be honest, continue to be honest with yourself about that, and then just be honest with them. And here's what I always say to people in this situation: if that man or that woman won't give you grace about this, then move on. Okay, because there's going to be a million times more things that are more difficult in the future for that person to give you grace than anything about your past. Does that make sense? And so, but you want to be, I don't think that's a first date topic necessarily, but you certainly want to let them know. I don't know if that's a Facebook profile thing, but I do think you want to let them know. And remember, if there's no grace offered, or even if they, remember, again, what we verbalize isn't always the truth. If they verbalize grace, but they don't show grace, then remember, because what God's story that he's writing is about redemption, right? That's what Jesus is about. So what the scriptures are about, that's what you're enjoying, and you want to be with someone who celebrates redemption in your life, because you're going to need a lot of that, and they're going to need a lot of that. So I think just be straight up.
And I would just add, even in marriage, it would just be wrong for one of us to constantly pull up the past and point fingers. It would just be wrong. But the reason we have victories today is because we're cheering each other on in what God is doing and how he's at work in our lives. And I think you're forgiven, you're loved, that God is creating a future for you, and you live looking forward rather than looking back. And when God puts that person beside you that is wanting to date you and spend time with you and get to know you, then you want him also looking forward, or her looking forward, into what God has ahead of you rather than behind. And when you do look behind, you look at how God has been faithful and has brought you through it, rather than looking back and feeling guilt and shame.
And I also say, don't think you have to settle just because of what's happened in the past. Oh, I can't have so-and-so, or I can't have a guy who's this looking forward to God. So you want to make sure, in all these things, especially these single people, and don't settle. God hasn't rescued us from sin to give us something that's just average. So.
When I would add that you need to reset quite often in marriage. So we're constantly resetting, starting over, correcting things. And so, I don't believe we have a future without the past. I think a big mistake is that many of us try to create a future at the expense of our past. I think we need to understand Christ meets us right in our reality. And he was okay with me at my worst. So I love the gospel because it has prostitutes, and it has people with multiple marriages. It has people who were thieves. It has, you follow me? Because, there's nothing outside the garden that's good enough, right? So we know we live in a broken world, but as followers of Christ, we're constantly aligning to Christ. So once you realign to Christ, you're made new. Now the question is, with your partner, where do you go? Right? And that new beginning is where the power of the relationship is sourced. So In marriage, we're resetting expectations right now. Kelly and I have been talking about things just this month that are a reset. And so I would connect that to the great question, because it won't be the last time you have to reconcile and reset. And thank God for the redemption of Christ.
Anything else?
I would also chime in and say, start that new relationship with God, honesty, and respect as your three on your head and forehead, because you keep those in front of you, then you won't waver. And
Let's talk for a minute about the role of faith in relationships and in marriage. And here's what gets very interesting. I think the answers to the question, what if the person I'm involved with isn't a Christian, I think the answers are very different if you are thinking about dating them, or if you're currently married to them. I think even from a biblical rationale, I think the Bible speaks to things that are very, very different. One of the questions we got about this is, my boyfriend thing, it's a very interesting question, so thank you for submitting it, and I think it provides good discussion for Ken to tell you guys about once I hear the question. Just kidding. Sean and Kelly are going to dominate this answer. Said that my boyfriend thinks that all hypocrites are Christians are hypocrites, and they use this kind of praising, flowery language, and he just thinks the whole Christian faith deal is weird. Okay, so just want to say it again. My boyfriend, the person I've chosen to spend time with, my person I'm committed to, thinks that Christians, which I assume she is one based on the way she wrote the question, thinks that Christians are hypocrites, and he thinks it's just generally weird. Well, what do I do with this? So, a great question. And I never hold back from you guys my thoughts, do I? Huh? No, I want to ask. I will not ask. No, I want to ask who wrote it. Here are my thoughts. Permission, right? Yeah.
Go for it. We got your back.
I think the question is, so, yeah, for her, said he thinks people like her and people like us maybe are weird. What does she do with that? In my mind, it goes back to this values-based thing. It would be impossible for it to be true. Okay, hear me, this is going to be tough. And the couple may be in here, and there may be a lot of couples like this in here. It is impossible for her faith value to be really, really high if she's committed to being with a person who thinks she's really, really strange. In fact, for me, that would be the strange thing. Not that he would think we're strange. A lot of people should think differently about Christians. Now, we know that some people give us a bad name in a hypocritical way, and certainly the bullhorn guy yelling Bible verses somehow can give us a bad name, right? But it is impossible. In my view, it's impossible, going back to the values-based thing, because what we're talking about on the 28th of this month is that some of us are defined by relationships, because when the rubber hits the road and we have to make a choice between, and I know a lot of people in our church are at this point, when they have to make the faith decision versus the man or woman decision, many of them are making the man or woman decision, which means that when things butt up, even if it's faith, butt up against the relationship's going to win. And again, this is my response to a couple who is dating or thinking about dating. My response to somebody who's married to someone that's not a Christian, the Bible's really clear on that. 1 Corinthians 7, I think 12 through 16, talks about that we should live a certain way with our unbelieving spouse. We should not leave them. We should live a certain way to, in a sense, it says, I think, make them holy or to cleanse them. The idea there is so that they might see our lives, see the way we love them, and that they might be drawn to God through that love. Does that make sense? Two very, very different responses, and maybe you guys can pull out and make things clearer than I made them. But I think we have to ask ourselves a question: why would we, if we haven't made that commitment in marriage, you with me? Why would we make that commitment if Jesus is a high priority in our lives? Because you can't win together. Let's think about this. The question we asked earlier at the beginning was, can we have two accounts? And we talked about how that drives people away. Can we have two gods? And I know that's a tough question. I'm not saying I'm just going to give you pat answers, and I don't think that suffices. But I do think if we're going for oneness, let's take Christianity out of the thing. Let's say that you're Mormon, right? Well, if that's a huge value to you, right, and you two are becoming one, and you'd probably be with the Mormon, or maybe I would say the same thing regardless of what religion you are, just from a values based standpoint, obviously we believe that Christ has come to redeem us, and what I have to do personally is align myself with that, and what I want to do if my marriage is going to win, then I think we've got to be on the same page on that stuff.
Well, I love San Francisco because we live in a city where weird is okay. So, I drive down the street, and neighborhood by neighborhood, you have something different, and to the person who's different, I might be weird. That's fine. I actually think that's an honest assessment about the world. The world is diverse, and there's a lot of people who are weird that are different than me. So I would immediately want to make sure, to the person who asked the question, are you clear on the fact that he's not calling you weird? Because if he's calling you weird, then that means he wants you to change. So I'm assuming that's not the case, right? I'm assuming it may be the other part where the person might feel shunned by whatever the definition of Christianity is. And I think we can go ahead and say this, hey, we agree Christianity is a very weird group because we look a lot of different ways, and we're not necessarily form and function only. It's a relationship to Christ. And so the hypocrisy comes out because Christ is enough for the messy us. And so, yeah, I am a hypocrite because there is perfect Christ and then there is me. And at my best, I'm aligned to Christ. At my worst, I'm not. And so I think there's an intellectual dialogue that should happen. But I would be more concerned that maybe your friends, whoever asked that question, might be making your boyfriend feel like an outsider. And I would try to work through that. And then to Ben's point, you ought to make the decision. How important is it that you be yoked together in your belief system before you commit to marriage? Because I think it was a boyfriend-girlfriend question, right? Yeah. And I think the worst thing we do as Christians is try to answer that question versus understanding what the person actually feels when they say that. That may just be a reaction. It may just be them expressing how they feel. And I agree, Christians, we're weird and we are hypocrites. And we can talk about why that happens.
I'll link that to another question that was on here. How can we spiritually grow together? And if that's a value, if you're a Christ follower and you're pursuing Christ, then you want the person you're dating to have that same value and to be pursuing Christ with you. And I don't know, just even trying to think of some things that we've done to spiritually grow together. I know that I've had conversations with girls where whether their husband or someone that they're dating doesn't want to talk or wants to keep their faith to themselves. And I think when you see God at work and when you realize that you're not perfect and that God's at work within you, that's something that you want to talk about. And I think even in just small ways of, even at the house sometimes we'll even just talk about our highs and lows, and that's just a very simple way to engage with each other in conversation. You get to start to understand and piece things together of how you've seen God at work during the day or things like that.
Yeah, and I think we have very often in our church, lots and lots of times, we have people who, man or woman, they're married to each other. One of them is a Christian, and oftentimes the other one doesn't want anything to do with it. And so we deal with that a whole lot. And I think the biblical imperative is to stay, first of all. And I'm not trying to think of words that rhyme. I think it is certainly to pray for them, believing that God can change their heart, because and it's to live with hope, all right? When hope's taken from us, we have nothing, right? It doesn't matter, relational realm, any realm of life, when hope's taken from us. And so it can be hard for those people that I interact with, I'm thinking about particular people, it's hard for them to be hopeful. But I can also sit here and tell you that there are women in our church who started off in this scenario, and they're actually at this event today, and the husband, she loved him well. The husband's come to faith in Christ. They're in the room today, and her greatest hopes have been fulfilled, which is really incredible. And so, because redemption's true for us, it can be true for anybody. And so we want to love, we want to love them well, and certainly don't want to be that, we will be that hypocrite. We will do things that don't make sense to them, but we don't want to. We don't want to live the life that fuels the fire for whatever their thing is that they're most against. I do think sometimes it reveals things about them and us. Right? It's not just hey, they think I'm this. They must be this. It reveals things. that are probably different than just them being set off by Christianity. There's something going on in their heart, probably something going on in your heart. Well, I want to make sure we answer the questions you guys submitted today since we told you we would do that. Thoughts on soulmates. Is there such a thing as a soulmate? I'm hoping so. Not really. Does God only have one person that He has in mind for everyone? I'll for sure say He doesn't have two, but no. In marriage I'm talking about. But is it that, hey, person A, God has match A for them? Does He just have one person in mind for us to marry?
I don't know that I have a good answer.
That was good wisdom.
Well, my father, when I was, Kelly dumped me at one point in our relationship.
Confessing sin is not allowed.
And, I was talking to my father and I just said, Dad, I really do love Kelly. And so I was heartbroken and struggling. You can play the music. And,
It have to be a country song.
but I was also worried, right? I was worried. I'm not a follower of Christ at this point. I just have to confess that. I'm a Christian. Okay? I know the right things to say. I know. I'm just not following Christ. Okay? So you need to know that. And I just said, Dad, it's purely pragmatic for me. Am I going to miss the boat here? And he goes, son, and back to the garden where God makes these adjustments. And without getting too theological, the sovereignty of God's the sovereignty of God, and somehow He knows all. But He also makes these adjustments. And my father says, son, there's probably 7 girls at the college I was at Liberty University, that you could marry and make a wonderful life with. Because he says, remember, marriage is about commitment. Marriage is about the work. Marriage is about faithfulness. It's about becoming something together. And it was a great conversation because I was reminded that marriage just isn't luck. You follow me? And so when people throw out the word soulmate, I get nervous because it gives me a pass out of jail maybe. And so do I think I'm married to my soulmate? Sure. One of the beautiful things about Christianity is that you take the person who's the most spiritual person you know, and I'm telling you this, they have no more Jesus than you have. John 15 says that Jesus abides in you if you've opened your heart to Jesus. So in a particular relationship, no matter who you're in relationship with, Jesus connected to Jesus. Jesus and me, Jesus and her. That is the soulmate. And so, that story was very helpful. And so I did. I went out and dated another girl. And we were sitting outside. Kelly came out of Liberty University's lunch hall and saw me sitting there. And that inspired her to come back and reconsider. That's
3.0 on that.
You can Google Ken McCord on that.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. The Bible really doesn't say anything about finding the one, but it definitely tells us what we do when we have the one. And yeah, it's tough. I do think that's huge. For Shauna, it was interesting. She kind of had put me on cold ice for a bit there. And my strategy, and this was terrible, this is the kind of guy I was, because she wanted to be my best friend. And I told her, that's great until I have a wife. And she didn't want that to go down. And so, this is a true story. She did not want anyone else to occupy that role. And so she upped the commitment a little bit. And but yeah, I think I don't think you need to be centered on one soulmate. I do think there are kinds of people. He didn't say there were 7 million. He said there were probably 7. And I do think there are kinds of people that when just because of the way God's wired us and things like that, but based on our values, then we know it's not are they the one, but it's not even do they have 100 things on the list. Please don't do that to a man or a woman. But it is, does this make sense because of the things I know about myself, what I'm after in life, what I feel like God's got for me? Does it make sense? Another question here is, how do you walk with a spouse when you think they're going through a midlife crisis? What do you do when they're, it's not that the marriage is terrible, but your life's pretty steady and doing okay, and they have this major, major issue. Is it sharing personal crisis, or how we walk through things together?
That was Kelly's question about me. We haven't gone through this yet, so I think it's a hard question. to answer. I mean, I'll just confess my own reality. I've had to reconsider a lot of my life. You hit 40, I'm 40. So, some people say that's, 50 is the new 40. But I'm looking back on the past 22, 23 years, and there are a lot of decisions that I wish I would have made that I didn't make. And I'm assuming that if I'm in the shoes of that particular man, I would just want to be understood. I don't think you would tolerate my bad behavior if I'm behaving badly. But I would count on friends around the midlife crisis, but also recognize that you might be able, as a partner, to jump into the crisis with them. Maybe you need to be adventurous together. Maybe you need to do something crazy together. Maybe you know what I'm saying? It's like it's hard to have an affair if you're having an affair with your own wife. It's like you have a midday fling with your own wife. That works out, right? So jump into the boat and engage the reality, because you're going to have your time as well, where you're going to need your husband to come alongside your reality.
Yeah, I think in moments like that, that's why our faith is such a big deal to us, and having people that can speak into our lives, because that person who's in the crisis, it's not necessarily even their fault, it's just the reality. They're not going to be able to give you any strength. But a strong faith that you've sown over the time, years, whatever, strong relationships, and with permission from the other person to talk to the people that you both agree upon about the issue, and then bring them into it as that person's ready. I think those things are helpful. But you won't be able to get a lot of strength, and it won't be a receiving season for you. And you need to be okay with that, or to find other outlets from God's Word and other places to receive. And then sometimes it's just holding back the cuss words you want to call them in those moments. And it's like, okay, this is what I signed up for. I'm still looking for the win for the marriage. And the win for the marriage, sometimes it makes me keep my mouth shut. And but then also living with hope that, okay, God, it's God, I'll be the wife I need to be today, or I'll be the husband I need to be today, but would you make this end soon? Would you sow in that prayer? Would you keep asking God to deliver and to... it's just neat to see when God brings you out of something, but to do so collectively. I think I've got to give Shauna permission to speak into my crisis moments before the crisis comes, because when the crisis comes, I'm going to tell her I don't want to hear her. And so I think it's, again, a fronting decision, like, hey, you know when I'm, you just know each other, and so it's like there's no pretending anymore. And sometimes I get upset with her, even when I know it's what I need to hear. She still needs to say it. But I think that agreed upon front-end decision, hey, when I'm like this, just tell me to grow up, or just tell me, hey, Ben, you're going down a path you don't want to go down. And I think that's been helpful for us.
And throughout marriage, whether it's midlife crisis or, for us, we walked through when Ben's mom passed away, there's lots of ups and downs. There's lots of moments where he has to be strong, and then there's moments when, as the wife, I have to be strong. And it's letting the other be strong for you, and just leaning into that strength. I am a very independent person. I would rather fight my own battle by myself, but I've done that too many times and realized this is going to be so much easier if I just bring Ben up to speed with what's going on, whether it was early days of raising kids and not feeling adequate, just feeling completely worn out, or there have been moments where I'm struggling with purpose and what God has for me. It's bringing him up to speed with what's going on. And a lot of times, especially as women, we just want him to listen and not fix it, and walk us through this together. And I think, especially in our culture, we want the fix fast, and we want to get through it fast. But I will say, I think the most powerful moments in our marriage have been when we've said, we're walking through this together, no matter how long it takes. And it ends up not taking as long as, the darkness in the tunnel seemed so deep and dark. But it just seemed so much brighter when I realized I'm going to talk to him about it. We're going to pray about it. He's going to invite other women to surround me and pour into me so that we can get through this together.
And those conversations usually come about because we've realized so evidently that we've walked our own path, right? That's usually what brings those. We don't have those conversations, hey, we're going to a crisis, Shauna, let's stay together on the same team. It's usually like when I'm like, fine, if you're going to do that, I'm not even going to talk to you about it. I'm going to tell my friends on, whatever. And I think that's huge. we have 12 minutes left. I know this is a big one, and I got hit up with it over the break, and in these questions too. We know that men and women communicate exactly the same, and so just the communication thing. What have been some things that have been helpful that you've learned? What are things that you guys would speak into all of us regarding how we communicate together, how we communicate one to each other? Again, if there's any differences between men and women, I don't know. Why don't you speak first?
This was a hard one and still is. It gets easier, 12 years of marriage, than it was year one. But I think going into marriage, I was just dumbfounded to think, are we really talking like this? Like, is anything I'm saying, are you listening to any of this? And then what in the world are you trying to say?
I was always right.
You were always right.
Shauna's grandfather, the day we got married, he said, "You know, Ben, you can either, in your marriage, he said, you can either be happy or you can be right."
You've chosen happiness.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. At least in the latter years.
I think for me, and like I said, a lot of how you're raised and your family and friendships that you were surrounded by speak so much into this. And so I really, like I said, my parents went to the room and closed the door when they had discussions. So I didn't know how to fight right. But I remember in our when we got married, it was very important that we found a church to get plugged into, and we surrounded ourselves. The class was for couples that have only been married up to a year, so we were literally all in the same boat together. But I just remember this couple speaking into our lives and saying, you're going to fight, but it's how do you fight right? And you're going to have to communicate, but how do you communicate well with each other? And I think some of the things that I took from that and that we're still learning is that he is having to be very patient with me because, like he said, I like to use 1,000 words instead of 10 words. And there are moments where he doesn't have time to listen to 1,000 words, and I probably shouldn't spend the time or the energy getting out 1,000 words like I'm doing right now. But what it comes down to is him. It's that ebb and flow. And I just think, when you see couples that have been married 40 and 50 years, they don't even have to talk to each other. They just kind of look at each other and kind of, understand. And so it is a work in progress. And I think the more we have just been upfront with each other and sometimes it is me saying, I just need a few minutes to get my thoughts together, and then I'll come back and talk to you. And he's just had to learn to be patient with that. Learning to be patient with that. But that I don't know, that's probably what I would say as far as effectively communicating with each other is just telling each other what you're trying to communicate, if you need more time to figure out what you're trying to say, and more of a give and take from each other.
Should be a good tennis match, going back and forth, not just one side hitting the ball at the wall. You have to communicate back. Those of you who would rather close up and go sit in a dark closet. The one thing that I've learned is the tone of the communication. It's either going to divide or promote partnership, the oneness. And so just make sure the tone is for the best benefit of your mate, your spouse. And if it goes off the wagon, regroup, reset button, and say, let's start over. Or let's go for a walk and keep talking.
Yeah, and this question, I think, assumes something negative, right? So we're not asking the question because communication's great. So my assumption is if you take 100% of your week, you can go 30% of our communications thumbs up, 30% so-so, 40% is not so good. So there's a question about how do you get peace before you go to bed, right off of the scripture that talks about don't go to bed angry. Well, Kelly and I have really agreed that if we're in a conflict, and I don't know if this happens with you guys, but it happens with us, it's going to be like at 11:15 at night. And I'm like, what in the world just happened? It's like we could have argued all day, but now we're going to argue now. And then the tone gets off, and we go, okay, what's our goal? And so we have a goal, and our goal is peace, right? We want oneness. So then we go, what do we need to do to get there? Then the next day, we're going to sit down and go, okay, where did the pressure build up? Now we're going to go to the problem solving side. We're going to dig into what things in a plan, what things structurally. You talk about your playbook. That's where you have to go back and begin to make some adjustments so that the next time you get out on the field, you're playing in harmony. And so we don't try to solve the world's problems at 11:15 at night. We're not going to pull out the checkbook and we're not going to pull out the calendar. But we're going to try to get peace, go to bed, and then we begin to make adjustments. And then you begin to see those percentages get better and better because you're learning not only to communicate with one another, but to run your life with some version of order. Because we all want to feel safe. And most of the time when Kelly and I have a communication problem, she doesn't feel safe. I've failed to make her feel safe. And I need to focus on it.
Okay, we're 12:54. I know we're out of time, and we will plan something in the spring, gender specific or whatever. Any questions though before we close up shop here today? Chad?
My neighbor has a question,
Yeah. Yes. What's your neighbor struggling with?
and he's afraid that the answer is it depends, like every question. But when, pragmatically, I guess, when do you decide that it's a good time to start having kids? My neighbor wants to know.
Yeah. I don't have a hard fast rule, but I do have our own story, and that was my October of 2002. We had been over to see my mom. She had just let us know we'd had dinner with them. We had dinner for Sean's birthday, then we went to see my parents. She let us know that night she was done taking chemotherapy. And so we knew that for us, it was just like, I just looked at Sean and said, hey, I'd love for us to try to give her grandchild before she passed away. And she died the next month, but we did get pregnant in January, and it was really that. We always knew we wanted kids. We said the 5-year thing, and then, but I always like accomplishing things earlier before the deadline. Seriously, that's just me. I want to win. I want to win fast. And
Success.
yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a fun message tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. But that was our story. I don't have anything theological or even from a leadership standpoint. You're never going to be ready, and so gratefully God gives you 9 months of prep time at least.
I would answer this question, why do you want to have kids? And as you're working through that as a couple, then go, do you want to be young as their adults? Or do you want to be older as you're raising them? And then I will say this isn't a depends. The children have helped us in our marriage. They're a mirror image of us, good and bad. So it's like I can see all of my bad in my children. I can see all of it. And all Kelly has to go is, see?
That's true.
So children are
That is
just a
true.
wonderful gift when we think of being formed. My children have helped form me more than anything else on this planet.
And I'll just add, I think it's very easy for you to think, okay, life has to stop for us to have children, and in a sense, it kind of has to slow down. But instead of seeing it as life has to stop, think of it as when we bring this child into the world, this child comes along beside us, and we do life together. I know I grew up in a family where it was the mom and dad, and then it was the kids, and we just kind of tagged along. But I think one thing we're trying to do differently with our kids is that we're in this life together. You're going to see mom and dad mess up. You're going to see us take risks. You're going to see us have to make those decisions of, do we move here? Do I keep this job? Do we leave this job? What do we do? But instead of it being, I'm getting off track. Instead of it being, when do we have kids and how does this fit in and does life have to stop? Just see it like Ben said, you've got that 9-month prep time of getting things ready if you need to move or change jobs or tweak things here and there. But see it as just, children that God gives you that just gets to come alongside you.
I do think the kids, one of the things that's crazy for us is that we've lived in lots of less stressful places, and I've done every job I've ever had has been less stressful than my one here. But our marriage is thriving more with kids and more in this city than it ever thrived before, which is so weird. It's going to eat you up, or it's going to force you to win. And to win, you got to rise above the cultural pressure. This is the greatest risky thing we've ever done. Our kids have never been as much involved as they're involved in things, and so it's really for the kids and the city being here specifically, and the risk of planting this church. Those things have forced us to have a stronger marriage. Otherwise, none of those things would have gone well. But you can't stay in the status quo range with a marriage if you start having kids. What's average before kids is only going to, unless you reset and make the adjustments.
And I was going to say, and I think we've even said, just the four of us talking and thinking through today, is that marriage does look different in San Francisco, and I realize you guys have lived that out more than we have, but I think for us, it's caused us to resist the status quo and realize that a lot of people here, marriage just has this kind of like old-timey, antique, granny look to it. But instead, we want to be a church that says, God is for marriage, we're for your marriage, and regardless of what society and the culture around says about marriage or even depicts about marriage, God says it's good, and we want to cheer you guys on as you even look into our lives and say, we're going to resist status quo, we're going to have the best marriage possible.
And one more? We got someone? Yes.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a little bit.
Great.
I never heard what you just said about children making, at the very onset, vibrate your marriage. Instead, I've heard that when you have kids, there is a divide between the husband and the wife, most especially if you do not have a foundation, well, not necessarily foundation, but if you didn't have years together, whereby you do know each other, then children, quote unquote, it just doesn't matter, come first before your spouse. So just going back to the question about when should you have kids or how you should think about it, I know it's all about the gift of God and children definitely are blessings, but I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit because I've spoken to couples who have children and it's always about the kids before, me and my spouse or something like that.
It's great, yeah. And here's the deal. Just like being older doesn't make us mature, having a certain amount of years we've been married doesn't necessarily make us mature, though we hope in time that we end up with a more mature marriage. For us, what I see usually is when people do have kids, that the kids are definitely number one in the house. And what we've had to do is just show our kids. They're up there, right? They're up there, but we do things to them. Thursday night, if necessary, we show them things consistently to let them know that. They never wonder, we don't want them wondering, do they love me? But they're absolutely, there's no question in their mind. Thursday night, it was Shauna's birthday. We had a tough week health-wise with our kids. And I was taking Shauna out for her birthday, and one of them just looked at me and said, Dad, do you have to do a date out with Mom? And I just told him what we've been saying from the get-go. Hey, if you want me to be your dad in the best way possible, and for you to become the husband you'll want to be, I'm going to do this. And you have to keep showing them. Now, what's true, what's hard, when those kids are little, I'm not getting the time they're getting. So one of the things she had to let me know was, hey, just because you're not getting this from me right now, or if I go to a busy season of ministry and I'm actually at the church more than I'm home, that doesn't need to last forever, by the way, we have to verbally state and know in our hearts, hey, you know what, you're still more important, but this is just urgent. There's, I don't need my diaper changed, thankfully, right? I mean, it's just true. I don't need someone to feed me. But I'm not playing second fiddle, and we've played that out pretty well with our kids. And if you were to, their kids are older, they could espouse a view on that more. But our kids would be able to tell you, even at the age of 5, 7, and 9, that hey, my parents, they the reason our kids go to bed at 7:30. Yes, we think they need that much sleep, but because that gives us that reprieve from them every single night. It's true. So we have friends over now after 7:30. Ken and Kelly came over 2 Thursdays ago. We did it at 7:30 because the babysitting was free because they were asleep. So we reserve that time every single night. As they grow, we may increase their curfew by 7 or 8 minutes, but that's what we do every single night. We strategically...
The best thing you can give your children is a healthy marriage.
That's fine. We find people all the time say, you guys leave your kids for a week? We're like, yeah, 2 or 3 times a year. And I'm not trying to get in hot water here. Some of you are like, Ben, you're crazy. Well, we have people we can trust, and we know what's best for us, and we've made our values. And we're living them out. And
we also tell our kids when we do go on date nights, we say, we will come back as better parents if we can go out together.
Yeah.
You need that time.
But I think as far as when is right, without saying it depends, because Chad's taking that one away from us. I do think it's, again, one of those things being just like Cesar and Mara are talking about with his risk factor or whatever. I do think that you want to be on the same page, right? You don't want to be using contraceptives and not let your spouse know about it because they want kids and you don't, right? I mean, without telling them, they'll probably figure it out anyway. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things. Hey, we're in agreement with this, and then you have all the ins and outs of who knows if it takes forever for us to get, all kinds of things to deal with. But I think you want to be on the same page if you're going to go for that. Of course, 2 of our 3 kids were not planned by any means, so sometimes you do lose choice over that. But yeah, it's a great thing. The biggest thing, a lot of times with couples when it comes to the kid thing, is just like singles with marriage. Sometimes it's literally just rooted in selfishness. Not always, but sometimes it is just rooted in selfishness. And because it is going to demand things of you. No doubt that they're going to, if you don't have a strong marriage, you're going to have to adjust some things to get it strong and certainly to keep it strong. I know we're out of time. It'd be great to have more conversations after this. Just to respect your time, I want to pray for us. You're free to leave. If you can hang around a few minutes, Tim will give us instructions on getting this place cleaned up. Right? Anything to know?
If you can stay for 5 minutes, meet you by the soundboard.
Awesome. 5 minutes by the soundboard and we'll go for it. Let's pray, and you guys enjoy your Saturday, and I hope this was helpful. And I think there will be a round 2 in the spring without a doubt. So let's pray. God, thanks for today. God, I love what this states about our church, just in our desires to learn and to grow. God, I pray that you would use what is helpful that's been said today. God, I pray that you would discard the things that are confusing or unhelpful. God, I pray that we would be a church who is for everyone. God, that we would be for singles. God, we would be for those that are married. God, I pray that we would answer the question, why marriage? Well, it's because it's worth it. It's because it's part of God's design. God, I pray for the singles in our church, God, that they wouldn't settle. God, I pray that they would be developed men and women here at Epic and through other means, so that the opportunity for stronger marriages is better right in the beginning. God, I pray for the marriages represented in our church. God, we need your grace. We need your wisdom. God, we need your favor, and we need your protection. And God, at the bottom line, I think what we've said today is what we need is to know it's worth it. God, we will do whatever it takes when we believe something is worth it, whether it's a salary or a decision or a move. So God, I pray marriage would be in that same vein as we sense the AC coming on for the first time today. God, we're grateful. Pray that you would give us favor as we walk out of here. In Jesus' name, amen. That's awesome, guys. That's awesome.